Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2 3. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. I get that. I get it, but I don't understand why, okay? 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. 1 2.
So you shouldn't have to go through the house to have it.
Yeah, I get it. Check 1 2 1 2. Like, I see the signal here. It's super low.
Unless you've got signal on the line too, right?
Like this level, right? Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Okay, so 1 2 1 2 1 2.
All your work's all there.
1 2. Yeah. So if anything, okay, but check 1 2. You may have to bring the level down a bit, right? Okay. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name. Ardin. Ardin. And you are right here.
Anything?
B.
What's aux 2 for?
What do you mean?
We have aux 2 plugged in. What's that for?
That's sending it to. Oh. That's going into the ceiling speaker. That's what's going on. Yeah.
You're doing the ceiling speakers too?
Well, I gave it to Rusty as a possibility if he needed it. You know, I mean, it's a big room, right?
Yeah.
So we can't use aux 2, but it was working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
You think aux 1 is kibosh?
I don't know. Like all of a sudden, but
Well,
here.
this is on C, right?
Yeah, but that's C on the snake. That's all. Okay.
So you got it on C on the snake. Let's go to 3.
Check 1 2 1 2 2 2. There's lots of signal here. Okay. 2. How are you doing? How you doing, buddy? Good.
I was going to do a yeah, yeah. And we were going to do one next weekend here, but there's too many big comedy events like that. I'm looking for somebody for the 28th of May. So I want to come and hook up the bus. Yeah. I also got to learn more about the
This is a local autism thing. Jobs, I guess. More than anything, this is Jamie Boston.
yeah, so I'll finish talking to you.
Selling all these tickets.
I'm going to get on your way for now. Unless you're not busy.
No, I'm going to try to resolve some technical issues.
I'm going to say that I want to pull up a chair here. It's quiet.
You want to try D?
Okay. What's that?
You want to try D on the snake? Instead of C?
I'll put it into C, okay?
C is on 3 right now. So we'll test that. If that doesn't work,
What? The only problem is on the other end it's plugged into B. Okay? Move it?
oh,
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a problem with the cable, okay? So I'll move it to C now.
okay.
So you're moving out of C.
I don't know. I mean, I'm on 3 right now. So we'll see if 3 works, and we'll switch it to 1. And we'll see if 1 works.
I'm bringing in mental health here.
Yep. Yep. Fine. Yep. Yep. No.
So if 3 works right now, if you hear something up there, I'll take it out of here and put it back in 1. But you have to switch it over there, right?
Yeah, so hang on. I gotta get it on the right. Wait a minute. It's plugged into B right now.
Right. And what we have is C up here. So you should be
I
plugged
don't
in
really.
C.
Sorry. aux 2 is connected to channel D. Okay. You're on you're sending out on C, but onto channel. Sorry, you're sending out a channel C onto box A, right? No,
I don't know.
here, box B.
What's back here?
No, here I can change it here.
Okay, do you want me to go back to box 1 on this one then? Where it was originally?
Yeah, I mean it's feeding in, right?
Right.
Here, let's just switch it here. Check 1 2 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2 2. It's working. So there must be a problem with channel A on the snake. Okay. But the other thing is that of course it's
there.
completely carved out here, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I got the 3 wireless microphone right now on aux 1.
Yeah.
But
It just sounds like shit, of course, but that should be fine. I'll adjust it, okay? Check 1 2. I'm just gonna go and have a listen,
I
okay?
could hear it.
Yeah. Check 1 2. 1 2 2. Check 1 2 2. One two two 1 2. One two.
Okay, it's working?
It's working.
So whatever microphone she uses, I'll mute that aux channel.
So the red one. I'm gonna put this one back up there.
On the stage?
Yeah. This sounds really thin, but I mean the microphones aren't anywhere near. It shouldn't be a problem feedback-wise, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so if you're going to go back up there, I'll give you this. Put up there. It's locked and ready to go.
Okay. What do you mean locked? Oh.
It's locked. When it's red, it's locked. So they can't press any other button and shut it off accidentally. Don't press the button because you don't think it will. When you lock it,
when she
could advance it.
then it'll go.
Yes,
Then
it's just
it'll
when you
unlock.
lock it, it doesn't automatically shut off. It goes to sleep mode, but she just has to hit once and that's it.
That's her there, right? Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 3. No, that one's off too. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. You got it? Check 1 2 3. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Check, yeah. Yeah, they won't be talking right into them the way I will, right? Check 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. 1 2 3. Okay. Check 1 2 3 4 5.
I've got the automatic gain on this one too. Gain control.
Does that mean is it automatically muted or
It automatically
brings it down? Okay. Well, it's digital. There'd be nothing worse than clipping, right? Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 3. Check 1. Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2.
So if you guys could start making your way to your seats, Dr. Grandin will be up momentarily. So if you want to grab a coffee or some sweets or whatnot, and then make your way to your seats, be almost on time. Can't see anything. So looks like everybody's here. Welcome to an evening with Dr. Temple Grandin. Some of you guys have had the opportunity to meet her, selfie with her, take pictures with her already. If you haven't, I'm sure she'll make some time for you at the end of this to do so. So for the out-of-towners, I know there's plenty of you. Welcome to Sault Ste. Marie. Glad you can make it safely, and hope you make it home safely. Just to give you an idea of sort of the scope, we have, if you draw a 9-hour circle around Sault Ste. Marie, that's the draw for Dr. Grandin. So, again, thanks for traveling to the Sioux, and safe travels home. Obviously, the Algoma Autism Foundation is humbled by the support of this community and surrounding communities and businesses, so I think that goes without saying, but can't be said enough. Some personal thank yous, obviously, to the volunteers of the Algoma Autism Foundation. Again, great job, tireless efforts. A lot goes into planning things like this, so obviously thank you very much. RAIN, we partnered with RAIN and to bring Dr. Grandin here. This afternoon she did an amazing speech on humane cattle handling, and it was a well-attended event. Quattro Hotel and Conference Center, without them we wouldn't have a venue. So Tim Horton supplied all the coffee and whatnot in the back. Stork and Bundle was one of our sponsors for community sales, actually selling tickets on the ground. I did not see a rep from Stork and Bundle, but thank you, Stork and Bundle. Community Living Algoma, I think there's an army of Community Living Algoma people here. We appreciate your support not only for Temple Grandin, but the continued support for what we're doing around the community. And the convenience of a central location makes it very helpful for us. Metro helped us out with all the baking, so thank you to Metro. OMAFRA is the Ontario Ministry of Agricultural part of this, so thank you to them. And also the Cattlemen's Association as well. There's a huge partnership to make this all come together, and without every part of the collaboration, it may not have happened. So why am I standing up here? Obviously, I'm standing up here to introduce Dr. Grandin. She's an inspiration to myself and probably many of you in this room, and if she's not now, I suspect in an hour and a half she will be. She's a leader in autism awareness and acceptance. She's proof that difference doesn't mean less. Some things to think about. She's obviously an autism advocate, professor at Colorado State University in animal sciences. She's the author of many, many award-winning books. Many were available. Clearly, they're still available, and we have a fresh marker if you need it. She's never been to Northern Ontario. We chatted today on the way into town, and the farthest she's ever been in Ontario is around Barrie. So she definitely appreciates the beauty of Northern Ontario, and I think was appreciated how much green space we have, and suggested that we get some farms rolling. So she's a subject of an award-winning movie, as you know, documenting her life, named Temple Grandin. It was played by Claire Danes. Over lunch we chatted about that, and I'll have you know that a lot of the information in that movie is true to fact, and if you want to talk to her about that, I'm sure she can speak to it. Time Magazine's top 100 people in the heroes category. Give me a sec. She is the biggest champion for the autism community in the world, and she's here for you.
if I can figure out how to turn this one on. I think maybe I'll use this one. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Glad of that. Now, they got to get my slides up. Okay, good. They're there. That is good. I think we need to start thinking about what exactly the autism spectrum is. It's a very, very big spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, you might have Einstein, who had no language till age 3, or Mozart. And at the other end of the spectrum, somebody that maybe can't talk and may have problems with daily living skills. It's since they've changed the diagnostic guidelines, they've made the spectrum really big. Now, one of the most important things, if you got a 3-year-old that's not talking, is you got to start early intervention. I was very lucky to get into a good speech therapy program when I was 2.5 years old. Used a lot of behavioral principles. You know, there's a lot of talk about getting 20 or 30 hours a week of one-to-one teaching with a teacher. Well, in the 50s, you had sit-down meals 3 times a day for half an hour. That was also part of my therapy, where I had to be engaged. Lots of time was spent playing turn-taking games. Got to teach these kids how to take turns, along with structured nursery school kinds of activities. The thing we got to really do is we got to control the electronics. That needs to be limited to an hour a day. And when I was a little kid, we got one of the first TVs in the neighborhood. I was 5 when we got TV, so up till age 5, there was no electronics. That was 1 hour a day. Someone might say to me, well, can I use the iPad if I'm doing some interactive activity with an adult? Yes, but it has to be with a person. Don't want them just zoning out on electronics. That's what you don't want. You've got to keep the brains connected with the world. That is just essential. And a good teacher kind of knows just how much to stretch a kid. You got to push these kids some. Now, diagnosis is not precise. It's not like diagnosing tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, you've either got it or you don't. It is a behavioral profile. Now, I've been out to Silicon Valley. I've been to a lot of those big companies. And I've run into lots of programmers that I know are on the spectrum. And they avoid the labels. Don't get hung up on the labels. What's important is if you got a 3-year-old that's not talking, you better start working on them. And you work really hard on them, some of them you can kind of pull out of it. Others you may not. This is where it's so variable. A good teacher knows just how much to push a kid. Some kids you can kind of go and jerk their front door open. My speech teacher would grab me by the chin to get me to pay attention. Another kid, if you do that, you will drive them into sensory overload. So how do you know what kind of kid you got? All right, do the Walmart test, and you do have a Walmart here. Take them in the Walmart, and if every trip to Walmart, especially when it's busy, is a screaming fit, then you probably have very severe sensory problems. And then I just heard about a little autistic kid today that loves Walmart. So you probably have relatively mild sensory problems. And the kids with the more severe sensory problems, you've got to be careful not to drive them into sensory overload. See, this is, again, something that is extremely variable. Now, in the 50s, they used a method called teachable moments. In the 50s, it was just called, 50s upbringing. When I made a mistake, like using my finger to eat mashed potatoes, instead of saying no, my mother would give the instruction, use the fork. Calmly give the instruction. And during a meal, you might have 4 or 5 of these teachable moments where you just tell the kid what they should be doing rather than just screaming no. Got to get over here where I can see my slides here. You got to stretch them just outside their comfort zone. Don't throw them in the deep end of the pool. But if you don't stretch them, they don't develop. There's a tendency sometimes to overprotect these kids. I'm seeing too many fully verbal kids who have not learned things like shopping, shaking hands, saying please and thank you, just basic skills. And no sudden surprises. If a kid's going to be going to a new school, it'd be a really good idea to visit the school before you go. Or if you can't visit the school, to at least look at the website. So it's not such a surprise. And when I was 15, I had the opportunity to go to my aunt's ranch. And I was afraid to go. So mother gave me a choice. I could go for a week and come back, or I could decide to stay all summer. Not going was not going to be an option. If I hadn't gone to my aunt's ranch, I wouldn't have gotten involved in the cattle industry. Talked to another mom, and her kid was afraid to go to a sleepaway camp. And he went, and he really, really liked it. You know, again, they've got to get out and do things. Always give your kid a chance to use language. You always give them a chance to use language. You know, but you're going to have to wait for them to respond. Find situations where they have to use their words. Now provide choices of stretching activities. Okay, maybe an older child, they could do Boy Scouts, or they could do woodworking, but have some kind of a choice. Now, when I had a temper tantrum, Mother didn't scream at me and say, I'm going to take TV away. She'd put me in my room, she'd let me scream it out, and after I had stopped screaming, she'd say, well, you know the rule. There will be no television tonight. That was the rule. And if there was a temper tantrum at school, Mrs. Deach, the teacher, would call home and tell Mother that I had had a temper tantrum at school. Discipline between home and school was the same. Now, how can you tell if a kid's got some problems with sensory issues? Well, if he's covering up his ears, then he's going to have problems with sensory issues. And I'm tired tonight. I really will save the pictures for the book table because I'm finding that flash really distracting. And these kinds of problems get worse when I get tired, and it breaks my train of thought. Now, oftentimes, a loud sound is better tolerated if the child initiates the sound. Okay, or maybe can control how much time he's going to spend in that Walmart, where he's got some control of the sound. Like some kids will scream when they see a microphone because they're afraid it might do that screeching sound. So you'd give them the mic, let him walk up to the speaker, it goes, and then he can back off. Where the child can control it, that oftentimes makes it easier to tolerate a sound. Now you go in and you do a hearing test, you're going to find the ability to hear faint sounds. That is going to be normal. But the thing that's not normal is auditory detail. That's the ability to hear hard sounds like consonants. Like if I said dog, maybe the kid only heard og. So slow down, enunciate those consonants. Slow down when you talk to these kids. When the grown-ups got to talking really fast, it went into gibberish. Some individuals may have hearing cutting in and out like a bad mobile phone conversation. And then you've got some kids that become echolele. Yak out the whole movie script, but they don't know what it means. There's basically 3 different ways that language can get messed up in the brain. Auditory processing. They do not hear the auditory detail. I had trouble with getting speech out. That was expressive. Then you have the kid where all kinds of speech comes out, but they don't know what it means. And you've got to teach them what it means. If he says apple, then give him an apple. Another problem in sensory things, in brains that have problems, is attention shifting slowness. It takes longer to shift back and forth between 2 different things. This is why it's so important to give the kid time to respond, you know, when you're trying to get him to use his language. This shows very clearly attention shifting problems. Okay, you've got a person with autism watching a movie, and the person's been equipped with eye tracking software. Now look at how many times the yellow line, the normal one, looks back and forth between the eyes. Well, the autistic's looking at the mouth because he doesn't hear very well, so he's trying to lip read. But the thing I want to really show you on this slide is the slow attention shifting. The red line hasn't shifted at all. It's like a computer that's slow. It takes time to shift attention. Give the kid time to respond. When I was 5 years old and I was in kindergarten, I got very frustrated because there was a little workbook thing I had, and I had to mark down all the pictures that began with B as in beautiful. And I marked the suitcase down as B as in bag, because in our house there were bags. And the teacher didn't give me time to explain that we called them bags. And that was very frustrating for me. Now, sensory issues can be very, very variable. I have no visual problems. But there's some individuals where images will break up, sort of like a bad TV pixelating, because in the back of your head, you got circuits for shape, color, motion, and texture. They got to work together to make a graphics file. And something is wrong with those circuits. Can you imagine if your visual system worked like this? That'd be rather bad. Now, you have an individual that remains nonverbal. Oftentimes, seeing and hearing is a jumble. Seeing is usually the first sense to get messed up. And they'll touch and smell things because touch and smell still work. That's why they're touching and smelling things. Now, the one sign that's a lot of problems with the visual system is they'll often do a lot of eye stims. They may tilt their head, look out the corner of their eye. Often the kid hates escalators because he can't tell how to get on and off the escalator. The eye exam may be more or less normal because the problem is in the back of the head. Let's say you have a kid, maybe in 3rd or 4th grade, still doesn't know how to read. You want to make sure he doesn't have a visual processing problem. Now, I want to make it very clear, this does not explain all dyslexia, but there's a subtype of dyslexia where the print jiggles on the page. And there's some very, very easy things you can do to correct this problem. So ask the kid, do you see the print jiggle on the page? Now, if you have old-fashioned fluorescent lights, or even some of the new LED lights are still pretty bad, you can have flicker. So you either got to get that desk over by the window, or you use an old-fashioned incandescent lamp. Now, I know those are getting obsolete, but they still make the decorative ones. You can still get those. Try putting the homework on different colored papers. Gray, tan, light blue, light green, lavender, all the different pale pastel papers. And you got to let the kid pick the color. Sometimes colored glasses work, often pinks, lavenders, and light tans. Again, the person has to pick out the color. I've seen students where, $16 pair of glasses at Walmart made their reading better. I want to emphasize this doesn't work on everybody, but you're talking about something very simple. Colored glasses, colored paper. Be silly not to try it. Now, we get into the whole thing about evidence-based. Now, I've lived in the practical world too long, and if something's really cheap, colored paper's cheap, it's not dangerous, and it's not time-consuming to try it, you might as well try it. That's the way I look at it. Now, individuals that have very severe sensory problems, it takes extreme effort to block out extraneous noise. Like when you put that flash on, that distracts my attention. The dog was doing quite a lot of barking and stuff like that. It distracts me. And when I get tired, that gets worse. I just have mild problems where it's a nuisance. But there's other people where they have to really expend great effort to block out distractions. Often they're going to need a lot of breaks. Some people are mono-channel. They've either got to look at something or hear something. They're not able to do both. And individuals that have a lot of visual problems often learn best auditory. Now, this is an interesting study. You can get this paper online. It's called Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. Okay, 3 key words. You won't find this paper unless you can put these 3 key words into Google. Autism, environmental enrichment. Maybe you better write that down. And in this method, which is a refereed, scientific, proper study, you stimulate 2 senses at the same time. They used 8 different aromatherapies. So maybe you smell vanilla and you touch carpet. And then maybe you listen to classical music and you touch warm and cold. Always stimulate 2 senses at the same time. It's an adjunct to things like behavior therapy and speech therapy. One of the senses is usually smell or touch. A lot of emphasis on smell and touch paired with other things. Another basic principle is always changing the pair of stimuli. Novelty. 2 senses at the same time, always novelty. And it uses simple things that, around the house. So warm and cold spoons, putting coins in the piggy bank, classical music CD, or now it would be classical music streaming or whatever. But things that we just have around the house. Now, if you have an older adult or an older child that doesn't get speech, these are some books you need to pick up online. How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? Now, Tito Mukapadahay is a nonverbal adult who can type independently, completely independently. I showed him a picture of an astronaut on a horse. I wanted something really weird to show him, so there was no way it could be rehearsed. And I asked him, tell me about this picture. And he types really fast, Apollo 11 on a horse. And then he jumps up and all flaps around. How can I talk if my lips don't move? Carly's voice. She lives in Ontario. And the reason I jump, this little Japanese boy explains how he jumps in order to tell where his body boundary is. My favorite of the three is How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? Because if you're working with nonverbal, kids that stay nonverbal, this is going to give you a lot of insight into a sensory jumbled up world. Scientists have learned a lot about the brain. Where you tend to have the abnormality is in the circuits between different brain departments. See, the outer part of the brain, that's your gray matter, what you think with. And then you have bundles of fibers that form inter-office communication. And that's where a lot of the abnormalities are. And they vary very greatly. Now, you need to look at a lot of personality traits, and a lot of traits are like a music mixing board. Okay, maybe one switch is for anxiety, another switch for visual thinking, another one for math ability, another for being social or less social. These are continuous traits. If you look at the genetics of autism, there's no single autism gene. That's a bunch of rubbish. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little code variations. Both sides of the family contribute them. And when you have two computer geeks put together, your chance of getting a severely autistic kid definitely increases. Because you concentrate the genetics. See, when you hear a word, you see a word, you speak a word, or you think about a word, different parts of the brain light up. And then you've got to have inter-office communications. Now there's my head. Now that is the connectome. This is all the white matter fibers, the inter-office communication. And you can look down on the bottom of that and you can see single little threads there. Those are nerve tails, single axons that go all the way across the brain and form fibers. This new imaging developed by Walter Snyder at the University of Pittsburgh can dissect out the fiber bundles. You know, eventually this will be used to diagnose speech problems really accurately. So far, the technology is being used for head injuries, but it's not have been picked up yet to look at some of these other issues, and I think it should be. And I think some of this has to do with doctors are really bad about being in silos. I was reading an article, I get Science and Nature, and there was a big article in one of those magazines about communication between different disciplines, and doctors are the worst for not reading outside of their specialty. Okay, there's the connectome without the, the head's a lot prettier. Now that is a fiber bundle for speak what you see. That's a normal one. Now I'll show you mine. And it's got a lot of extra bushes. Maybe that explains why you put a keyword in, I get pictures. Sort of like Google for images. Now if you were to go out and scan a whole bunch of people, at which point does an extra branch become abnormal? There's no black and white dividing line. There's no black and white dividing line between normal and abnormal. One is a little bit geeky become mild Asperger's. Well, there's what you're born with, but also what you grow up in. That's why we got to do early intervention. We got to get these kids out doing things. Because the more they learn, and the less autistic they're going to be. Now I paid a price for those extra bushes. If you count the fibers for speak what you see, I have less fibers, less bandwidth. So that probably explains why I had trouble getting my speech out. And there is a circuit for speak what I hear, and I've just got a little tiny one. I can't emphasize enough, build on the kids' strengths. By the time I was 4, I was talking, and I got really fluent by age 5. And around age 8, ability in art showed up. Now, this is not some of my art, but this is some art from an 8-year-old. And my ability in art was always encouraged. But I was encouraged to do lots of different kinds of art, because otherwise I would have just done endless horse heads. Take that thing the kid's interested in and broaden it. If he likes trains, let's read about trains. Let's do mathematics with trains. Broaden out that fixation. Expand on it, but make an associative link back to the fixation. Now, this is a picture a young man, actually from Canada, gave me that show how he has movies in his head. I am an extreme visual thinker. I have movies in my head. That is how I think. The HBO movie showed very clearly how I think. And the movie is available on your streaming service here. Now, half the cattle in Canada and the U.S. are handled in facilities that I designed. And when I designed things, being a visual thinker really helped me because I could test run equipment in my head. I used to think everybody could test run equipment in their head. It's been an interesting journey for me to learn that most other people aren't as visual. And there's an aerial view of the replica that they built for the movie. Made really happy seeing my drawings, my projects replicated. And the way I used to sell jobs is I would show off portfolios of my work. People thought I was weird, but when they saw my drawings, they'd go, "You did that?" Well, this is the beginning of 2 of my jobs back in the 70s. And I had some bosses that were mean to me. I also had some people that were good to me, that taught me some social skills. And on the Swift job in 1974, I criticized some welding that wasn't the best welding, and I said it looked like a pigeon doo-dooed on it. And Harley, the plant engineer, pulled me into his office down in the boiler room and explained very clearly that that's really rude and that I would have to apologize to Whitey the welder. I should have come to him first because he was Whitey's boss. But he explained to me exactly what I should do. Another thing I found, working in the construction industry, supervising projects for 20 years, affects how I think. Construction's all about getting jobs done. So I've seen several kids tonight come up to me, and they're fully verbal, 18 years old, and they haven't had a job. I had my first job when I was 13. When I was 15, I was cleaning horse stalls and running a horse barn. You know, we got to just start thinking out how to get jobs going in middle school, sort of paper route substitutes. Around here, there's lots of snow that needs to get shoveled. And there is one of my drawings. Yeah, people thought it was weird, but when I showed my drawings off. So if the kid's good at art, get the art on the phone and start doing some freelance work. I did some freelance sign painting when I was in high school. We've got to get working on the job stuff because they got to get out and do a job for other people outside the home. It's really important that it be outside the home. And just set it up in the neighborhood. Now, you got to remember, I come out of the construction industry, so you might do a little cash economy because we've got to teach this kid how to work. I'm finding this is one of the biggest problems. There's another one of my drawings. Now, when I realized my thinking was different, I was at an autism convention, and we got to talking about thinking. And I said to a speech therapist, think about a church steeple. And I was absolutely shocked that she got this vague, generalized thing. I only see specific ones. I don't have generalized one in my mind. They come up like Google for images. Childhood ones, ones in Fort Collins, famous ones. They flash up sequentially as pictures. See, my concept of what a steeple is based on all the steeples I've seen in the past. And then I can sort them into New England type, cathedral type, put them into different categories. So the more steeples I get out and see, I can then make them into different categories. Now, another brain scan showed that had big visual thinking circuit, probably in the top 25%. Real big visual thinking circuit. Now, this shows where I've got a deficit. What's blue on this scan is full of water. And you can see I have an asymmetry that pretty well wrecked the algebra department. Left parietal area. So how did I manage to get through college? I got through college because in '67, finite math was the educational fad. And with tutoring, I was able to do the finite math, probability, matrices, and statistics. But at least down in the States, they've got this whole algebra thing. Like I just heard the other day, kids got to take algebra to go to business school. I mean, really now? Yeah, what you need for business is you have to be able to read the Globe and the Mail, or if you're in the U.S., the USA Today, and do 6th grade math. That you need to have for business. That's it. This is one of my most important slides. I'm a photorealistic visual thinker, really poor at algebra. And one of the mistakes made in my education is I was not allowed to go on to geometry. That was a mistake. A lot of these kids who can't do algebra just go right on to geometry. Now, I did an interesting thing online last week. I was trying to look up interesting math lessons online. Well, instead of using regular verbal Google, I went on Google for images. And I typed in geometry. And I got fabulous websites, all kinds of visual things for teaching geometry. Then I was still on Google Images. I typed in trigonometry. And I got a bunch of visual things. And even when I typed in calculus, maybe about 25% of the stuff that I found was represented visually. But when I typed in algebra, nothing. Nothing came up that was visual at all. But to find really cool math stuff, search online on Google for images for stuff in math. You won't find anything algebra, but you'll find really cool stuff in geometry and trig. Another kind of thinker is the mathematician, the pattern thinker, thinking patterns. These kids often have trouble with reading. These are the kids that maybe when they're in 3rd or 4th grade, they're real super good at math. And maybe you need to advance them forward in math. I'll go over to a gifted meeting, and I'm finding gifted kids, yeah, they're the same little autistic kids. Then I go to a seminar at a gifted meeting, and they talk about gifted kids' social problems. I go, wait a minute, this sounds like an autism meeting. But there's some real problems with staying in the silos. I've made a point of going across between the silos. And then I go to the book table at a gifted meeting, then to an autism meeting, there's almost no overlap. People are staying in the silos. They're getting too hung up on the labels. They'll say, well, my kid has blah, 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 chromosome deletion, blah, 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 DNA, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I really don't care. Okay. What I want to know is age, and then how much speech have I got? What can he do? Can he dress himself? Can he read? Does he show that he's good at something? I don't really care what his diagnosis is. I'm more interested in what he's good at. Where does he have a problem? Then you have the guy that's the verbal facts man. This is the guy that knows everything about history, loves history, knows all the baseball scores or hockey scores, things like that, and maybe just sort of average in math. Now, there's two ways you can do some of the algebra things, more visually or more verbally. Teachers get too hung up on just teaching it one certain way. What's important is the outcome. Maybe you take the motorway to go somewhere, or you take the side streets. Both go to the same place. We got to start getting into a lot more outcomes. I'm very concerned that in the U.S., a lot of schools have taken out a lot of the trade school stuff. I saw the vocational school here when we came in. Take a lot of these kids that are kind of different. Vocational stuff's where they ought to be, skilled trade stuff. In the U.S., we have a huge shortage of auto mechanics right now. Also, in Canada, with a new code of practice for raising pigs, they're going to have to get rid of the gestation stalls and go to group housing. And they need a good person to teach the young pigs how to use their electronic key to eat in the electronic feeder. And that requires somebody that's very patient. That was discussed last week at the Banff Pork Conference. I go, oh boy, pig whisperer, perfect job. Sometimes for somebody that's kind of different. I'm always looking for good jobs. I want to give you a glimpse into the mind of the mathematician. This praying mantis is made out of a single sheet of folded paper. And what you see in the background is the folding pattern. That's definitely not my mind, but that's the pattern thinking mind. And there are some nice little origami stars made by some kids. And there I am working on carpentry. I loved hands-on things. Now, of course, in the 50s, girls were taught sewing. I loved sewing. embroidery in 3rd grade. Hands-on things and arts and crafts and things like that just, made life interesting for me. Also, hands-on things teach practical problem-solving skills. Now, we need to be getting a lot more hands-on things into the schools. Then you go out to Silicon Valley, and they've got all their kids in Montessori schools. They introduce programming when they're about 7 and apprentice them into, Google and other companies like that. Do they care about algebra? No. What they care about is, can you code? That's what they care about. Can you do the work? Silicon Valley is a no barrier of entry industry. You give them the right portfolio, you are in. So how do you get in? There's all kinds of internet tools today. I was really happy to find out that book, The Martian, and the movie, The Martian, that started out as a computer programmer's blog. Then it was put on a 99-cent Amazon Kindle, and then it took off. What did that cost? It's free. Get online and use this magic word called forum. Programming forum, art forum, history forum. Just put that magic word forum in, and you can find all kinds of things online. There's a lot of garbage online. There's also a lot of really wonderful stuff. So how did I learn really abstract stuff? Because when I was 4, I went to summer camp, and one of the things I had to learn at the summer camps, I had to learn Lord's Prayer. Now, I learned it, but I didn't know what it meant. So when we got to the power and the glory, what's that all about? Well, this is a rainbow with an electric tower at the base of the rainbow. That's the power and the glory. All right. This is a super important slide. All my thinking uses specific examples to learn concepts. I don't normally read PowerPoint slides, but I think this one needs to be read. It's bottom up, not top down. All concepts are learned with specific examples put into categories. So my concept of what a dog is gets better after seeing lots of different kinds of dogs. Okay, then what do I do about wolves or hyenas? Okay, so then you have the canids, and then you have the wild dogs, then you have the domestic dogs. Then you can take the domestic dogs and you can have them put them in the toy category, the sporting category. You can then start putting them in categories. But you want to teach a child what's rude behavior. That has to be taught by a specific example. So the kid spits. Okay, that's rude behavior. So he stirs his drink with his finger. That's kind of rude. You say a bad word. That is rude. See, again, that's specific examples. This little boy, again from Canada, gave me a picture showing how he's sorting cats and dogs into boxes. Sorting specific pictures into categories in his brain. Play games with categories with different objects. An object may be in more than one category. It can be red and it can be rectangular. Okay, the hats, are they used for work or play? It depends who's wearing the hat. Where are they wearing it? Play games with categories. The autistic brain picks out the little letters quicker than the big letters. The autistic brain tends to go into details. Okay, while I'm on the subject of the autistic brain, we still have copies of my book, The Autistic Brain, left. And in that book, I've got the scientific evidence for the different kinds of minds. The visual thinker, pattern thinker, and the word thinker. I also have lots of stuff in there on employment for the different kinds of thinkers. Because we've got to get these kids employed. When I was in high school, kids used to call me tape recorder. And I couldn't figure out why they called me tape recorder. Because maybe young people, they don't know what a tape recorder is. So now it's okay, solid state recording device or whatever. Why they call me that? Because I always use the same phrases over and over again. But we get these kids out doing lots of different things. Then they get more web pages in their brain. Sort of imagine it. You've got to fill up the internet that's inside their head. You've got to fill it up full of data. And you're not going to fill it up full of data unless you get them out doing a lot of different things. How do you teach number concepts? Kids have got to learn that numbers can apply to pencils, to people, to water bottles, to paper clips, to buildings, to mountains. Adding and subtraction, you can teach that with cooking. Cooking is really good for teaching proportionality. Fractions, you cut the pizza in half, you cut it into quarters. Now, there's some math teachers that say, well, that's terrible. You should just use the number line. Okay, I have no problem with the number line. But let's start with the pizza. Teach the concept of half of something. Then you can put the number line down in there. So, okay, now that's half the number line. But I think a lot of kids aren't going to understand that until you get to do the half the pizza. Teaching position words. You walk down the stairs. The plane went down and landed. I put a cup down. I lie down on the bed. You got to give 4 or 5 different examples for the word down. Otherwise, the kid might think it only applies to stairs. And you're going to need to do this with all the position words. In, on, under, over, all those different position words. You know, to teach communication, they're going to need names of things, and they're going to need position words, the names of people. Now, I was more interested in looking at things than looking at pictures of people. But we need to have people in the world interested in things. Tesla, who invented the power plant, would be labeled autistic today. Cavendish, who developed the principles of electricity, was probably on the autism spectrum. Okay, where did I get good social interaction? I got it through shared special interest activities. That's why it's so important to get kids into things like the school play, art, theater, band, computer programming. I had friends in horseback riding, electronics, model rockets. That's where a lot of these kids get their friends, through the shared interests. 4-H, FFA. Then there's things called maker community groups, hacker spaces. You know, where kids get to go and make all kinds of cool stuff with 3D printers. Shared interest. It could be outdoor activities, fishing, it could be winter sports, it could be a lot of different things. You just have to get creative and find out what's in the neighborhood. But I've had some parents say, we don't have a program for that. Why don't you create one? Okay, how do we get middle school kids interested in that engines are fun to fix? Maybe you get a retired mechanic to start a small engine repair. What's the price of old lawnmowers? They're free. Let's just get creative. Now, I find in troubleshooting, a lot of people have a difficult time categorizing where you've got a problem. Okay, let's say you have a nonverbal kid. All of a sudden, you got a big, fat behavior problem. Well, the first thing you got to do is make sure he doesn't have a hidden, painful medical problem. I talked to a grandmother last night. Nonverbal kid's like 4 or 5 years old. Been good, now he's behaving horribly. And he'd had some stomach problems. And then he'd been teething. Well, it took me, 5 or 6 questions to finally figure out that he just had lost a tooth yesterday. That's still going to be sore. That's going to count for the behavior problem. Or maybe he's throwing a fit because he sees a mic and he's afraid it might make a noise. The other thing is, can't process lots of rapid information. I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk. That was absolutely, totally frustrating. Or I'd throw a big fit to get attention, or I'd throw one to get out of doing something. Too often times I got people saying to me, what do I do about autistic behavior? Well, I don't know. I got to know how old the kid is, what were they doing, what was the level of functioning. There's a lot of questions I've got to ask. There's a tendency when you think in words to overgeneralize. And when I go and do a dog behavior talk or a horse behavior talk, I see the same tendency to overgeneralize. I want to get you to not do that. Now, here are some accommodations we may need. Some kids, the fire alarm is so horrible, you need to just take them out. There are some kids where tolerating Walmart's impossible. I have problems with scratchy clothes. A lot of the companies now have cheapened up the cottons, and they all itch. I have bought like 3 different pairs of pants. I'm going to give them away. I can't stand them. And they're getting them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Then I found one brand that didn't itch, and they only had, one my size. Problems with fluorescent lighting. Now, these are 2 things that are often a problem with many individuals with autism and other problems. Multitasking is hard. Remember, the processing speed of the brain is slowed down. The other thing is, I cannot remember long strings of verbal information. Don't do long strings of verbal information. If there's a task that has a sequence of things to do, give them a pilot's checklist with bullet points. Just tell them it's a pilot's checklist. Something as simple as, okay, tear down the ice cream machine at McDonald's, clean it, and put it back together again. Even now, I would need a pilot's checklist. Tear down, cleaning steps, reassembly steps. Now, after I had done it for a few weeks, I wouldn't need it. But in the beginning, I would need that because I do not remember sequence. Working memory is absolutely terrible. I have to rely on long-term memory. Okay, here are bad accommodations. I'm seeing kind of too much kind of handicap mentality. So you got a shy boy that's afraid to do his lecture in class and he does it on Skype. No way. The first talk I gave in graduate school, I panicked and walked out. And the other big thing I was not allowed to do was to stay in my room all day. I'm seeing too many recluses in the room. Getting addicted to video games. Got to get that under control. I've seen 18-year-old honors students that have never grocery shopped. That is absolutely ridiculous. And then too oftentimes the parents speak for the kid. They get kind of too much into the autism. I get asked all the time, why don't you just give up the cattle industry and just do autism? Well, I think it's important that I still have a real job that has nothing at all to do with autism. I'm seeing a lot of kids on the high end of the spectrum that want to do autism activism. Well, I didn't do any autism activism until I was 35 years old. And I'd already been in the cattle industry for 10 years. Now, it's fine to do autism activism, but I think you need to have some life with other things other than autism. I'm seeing a lot of kids, 18, 19 years old, that haven't had a job yet. Let's just grease those skids and get them into a job. And they need to have a boss that doesn't hint when they don't get along with coworkers, that just pulls them into the office and just explains what they're doing wrong. You know, like, okay, you sent an email around the entire office with a gigantic attachment on the Star Trek convention. That probably wasn't the best thing to do. But then on the other hand, there was a teacher who started a Star Trek club in her school because she knew the one autistic kid liked Star Trek and Star Wars, and then he got friends through that. That was a really, really good thing to do. Here's where a 50s upbringing taught me many important skills. Turn-taking. Board games, had to sit through church because sometimes I got to do something the rest of the family wants to do. Being on time, pound it in. I have college counselors now telling me that 70% of the Asperger type of kids on the spectrum have time management issues. That was not a problem for me. That was pounded in. Dinner was at 6 o'clock. I'd come in like 1 minute before, but I was on time. Doing some family activities I hated, but the rest of the family wanted to do them. Another thing, party hostess at my mother's parties. Had to shake hands with all the guests, take their coats, saying please and thank you. And then I already talked about the teachable moments on social mistakes. But I'm seeing too many kids getting too babied. I ran into an 11-year-old boy, fully verbal. Mom was still taking him in the ladies' room. I'm going, really? So we were having dinner, having lunch at a restaurant. And I told this kid what the rules were for guys. Women talk to each other. Guys don't talk. Use the facility furthest away from the other guy. Mind your own business. Look at the wall. Wash your hands and get out of there. And then at the end of the meal, I just said, Guy, it's time to use the boys' room. And he went up and he did it. Mom just sat there. I wasn't going to, and he did it. Okay, this is a perfectly nice restaurant. Nothing bad was going to happen. You've got to just get them to do it. Okay, this is bad behavior that wasn't tolerated when I was a kid. Manipulating the teacher, and fighting mother against the teacher, there's no way that happened. The rules were the same in both places. Bad table manners, that was corrected. We had sit-down Miss Manners meals, and I think that's part of therapy. When we add up that 20 or 30 hours a week, we had 3 30-minute meals. That's an hour and a half. That is part of the therapy because you're also teaching turn-taking and conversation at the same time. Laughing at an overweight lady, swearing. I can remember when I learned some of the bad words from next-door neighbors. And I was asking him what it meant. And he said, well, I don't know what it means, but if you say it in front of the grown-ups, you're in a pile of trouble. Now, these are social tasks we need to teach little kids, shaking hands. You've got to just demonstrate how to do it. It's sort of like teaching somebody in a foreign country. I went to China, and I learned if I point like this in China, that's rude. You point like this. But I was shocked at the behavior at the airport. I couldn't believe all the pushing and shoving on a plane. I had a guy climb over the top of me when I was in an aisle seat. That wouldn't happen here. But, I guess pushing and shoving at the airport's an okay thing to do. I didn't push and shove, but I made sure I got right up to the front of the line because I wanted to find a place to put my bag, but I did not climb over anybody. Not going to do that. But I'm seeing too many kids that don't know how to order food in restaurants. These were things that I learned very, very young. Shopping. By the time I was 7, I was getting 50 cents a week for allowance, and I knew exactly what I could buy with that. And if I wanted that 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. That's teaching the value of money. Also, little kids need to be doing household chores. Then in middle school, we got to find paper route substitutes. If you belong to a community group, maybe it's setting up chairs. I want something that's a volunteer job outside the home that they've got to do. That, kids aren't doing enough just free play and just, figuring things out. Boy, in my school, we used to grub around in this mucky pond and catch pollywogs and all this kind of stuff, bring it back up to the classroom. And then in the wintertime, we skated on the pond. But when it was warm weather, we just grubbed around in it. Don't try to de-geek the geek. I've done a lot of talks. I've been to JPL, Fermilab, NASA. It's lots of fun to spot the Asperger. So one Asperger gets to do these fun jobs, and the other one's playing video games in the basement. You know what? They're the same geek. This is what makes me crazy. Because being a visual thinker, I don't see the label, I see the guy. I go, wait a minute, I've seen guys like that's older version of that guy, one of these tech companies. It's okay to be eccentric, but you can't be an absolute slob. It's okay to cry. When I was in 9th grade, I threw a book at a girl and I got kicked out of school for that. So I ended up going to a boarding school where I cleaned a lot of horse stalls, I did a lot of carpentry work, very little studying. But I think Mr. Patey, the headmaster, realized I was learning how to work. And I'm realizing now how important that is. So I got in a fight in the cafeteria at school, and they took horseback riding away for a week. I still had to clean the stalls, but I couldn't ride them. And that's when I switched from anger to crying. Well, when the space shuttle was shut down, all the NASA space scientists were crying on 60 Minutes. You can look it up on 60 Minutes. It was really sad. It's okay for geeks to cry. Because if you throw briefcases at a tech company, you're fired. They don't tolerate that. Crying is tolerated. Throwing things is not. And I've had moms say to me, my teenage boy cries. I go, good. He's going to stay out of trouble with the law. That's really important. Because what is success? You see, in construction, it's all about finishing a job. I got a fully verbal kid of normal intelligence. I want him to stay out of trouble with the law, get a job and support himself, live independently, get a job he's going to like, maybe have a family. That's successful. If he ends up playing video games in the basement, that's not being very successful. Okay, being a categorizer, I've taken all the rules of the world and I put them in 3 categories. I still use this rule system. If you want a civilized society, you can't be burning down buildings and killing people. Then you have the courtesy rules. They help people get along. Then I have a special category. It's called illegal but not bad. And when you work in construction, you would never get a job done if you didn't do some illegals, well, not bads. It's just that simple. So then we got to figure out how to get out of this stupid algebra requirement or some other dumb bureaucratic thing. We just got to figure out how to do it. Then you got the sins of the system. Boy, you don't touch those dogs. They're different in each culture. And they get you in a lot of trouble. In Canada and the U.S., we can criticize the government. There's some other countries, if you criticize the government, you're in so much trouble it's not funny. That's an example of a sin of the system. You don't mess with the sins of the system. They get you in piles of trouble. Okay, we got a hidden painful medical problem in someone who's nonverbal. Here's a list of the most common ones. Acid reflux, heartburn, constipation, urinary tract infections, yeast infections, ear infections, toothaches, or maybe it's a little kid and the tooth has come out. Yeah, you've got a nonverbal kid that's been good, now all of a sudden his behavior is atrocious. And they have a hidden painful medical problem. You've got to rule that out. When I got into puberty, I started having horrendous panic attacks when the hormones hit. And using the squeezing machine helped relieve some of the anxiety. Another thing that relieved the anxiety was lots of exercise. I still do 100 sit-ups every night, and they help my anxiety. Now, brain scans have shown that my fear center is 3 times larger than normal. Now, I want to emphasize that's not true for everybody. See, again, this is the variability. But us visual thinkers, we tend to be much more fearful. I've worked with other visual thinking designers that I don't think we're on the spectrum, and a little bit of Prozac calms them down. Low doses of antidepressants have helped my anxiety. And I write about this in my book, Thinking in Pictures. There's still a few of those left over there. And I describe all of my experiences with anxiety. Now, the trick is, when you use an antidepressant for anxiety, you got to use much lower doses than for depression. I just talked with a lady tonight that did a low dose of Prozac, and it made her have agitation and insomnia. Needs to cut that dose even more. And cut those Prozacs in half. Probably would have worked. The doses for depression are often too high for treating anxiety. I don't really care what the label says. You just cut the dose. And too many times I have talked to people where they say, oh, we gave a little dose of Zoloft or something like that, and then we doubled it and all heck broke loose. It was just horrible. That's because you overdosed them on it. It doesn't work. But just the right amount. And I take an old-fashioned tricyclette, and I took it when I got in my early 30s. I've been on it ever since. I don't dare stop taking it. There's another bad thing is when you get someone really stable. Okay, let's say you have some bipolar or you got some depression. You're taking just one drug and you're nice and stable. Don't mess with it. But on the other hand, there's way too many drugs given out to little kids like candy. Way, way, way too much stuff. At least in my country there is. There's a rear view of the squeeze machine. There's a therapist working with pressure. Some of these little kids, when you're doing some of your behavior therapy, some kids react really well to deep pressure. Others don't. It's something worth trying. There's other kids that react to swinging. Slow swinging is calming. Then you got some kids where they're sort of hypo. You got to like jazz them up. So a lot of erratic kind of jerky kind of motion can turn them on. But try some of these things. These aren't difficult things to try. Another thing to try, some kids can learn to sing before they can learn to talk. Sometimes they can learn to sing the words. There's a kid with a weighted vest. It helps some kids, other kids it doesn't work. Another thing that a lot of people like are the compression garments that athletes wear. Like Under Armour, things like that. Put that on under their clothes. Another kid's going to hate it. Those are things you can try. Now, the problem we got with evidence-based, because I go on online, look up weighted vest stuff, find a paper in the medical literature says the weighted vest doesn't work. But the problem is if you go across all of the autism, it only works on a subgroup of pressure responders. But you're talking about something really cheap and easy. Doesn't work, you just don't use it. I think it's important to get these little kids so they want to be touched. When I was a little baby, I'd pull away because I got overwhelmed by touching. No, you need to work on desensitizing the kid. Deep pressure's calming. Tickle touches are alarming. So you use deep pressure. Okay, jobs. Okay, teenagers need to have jobs. And volunteer jobs do count, but they need to be on a schedule. I had a great science teacher. The right teacher can really help turn a kid around. And even for the so-called normal kids, how did they get into careers? Oftentimes, it's a certain teacher that gets them interested in something. Visit interesting places. Bring in trade journals. Okay, we have a lot of oil industry. Well, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can work on. The other thing I learned was to sell my skill rather than myself. Sell my portfolio. So you're good at programming, you show off a portfolio of programming, or your photography, or your drawings. And when I was in high school, I fixed up the old shed that housed our ski tow. It looks a lot nice. It looks so much nicer now. But I had to do it with something other people would like, and that would not be horses and flying saucers. There I am when I was getting my master's degree. I painted that sign for the carnival. How did I get that job? I showed my portfolio to an old sign painter. I don't know how I got that done on that little tiny ladder, but I did. And I wouldn't be caught dead doing that now. It was a really stupid exhibit. But the thing is, I was learning work skills. I can't emphasize how important that is. There I am next to my truck. Okay, jobs for middle school kids, walking dogs. How about doing virus scans on computers at local businesses, selling artwork? How about working on a neighborhood website or a church website? You know, there's a lot of different things. Things in the neighborhoods, offer up your kids services. You know, and a lot of these kids are big for their age. Well, you know, we just get him the job. I don't really care if he's 16 or not, as long as it's not something dangerous. I just think about my own neighborhood. There's a little insurance office where I get my car insurance. You know, a 12-year-old could go down there and help with some of the work in the office. Is he going to get hurt on the copier machine and the computer? That's all that's in there. You know, maybe the stapler might, you know, do something to him. You know, they just have got to learn some work skills. Get into things like Lego Mindstorm clubs. This is a great activity where kids can get friends. There's one of my drawings, and there's one of my facilities made in Google SketchUp. Google SketchUp is free. Go online and type in SketchUp. It's free software for 3D drawing, and you do need to have a pretty decent computer to use it. There's all kinds of stuff at the community colleges and the technical schools. You've got one right here. And what do we do about the algebra requirement for something like that? You know what you do? You show up for the class and you don't even let them know you're not registered. Yeah, that's illegal, but good. Because if you get in and you get good and you're good enough, the teacher will figure out a way to cut the red tape. And I was up at the University of Guelph at the farm meeting. They had a cattle meeting up there and a crop meeting. Went to some really interesting stuff on sustainable crops. It was real interesting. They had a session in there on how to cut red tape that was just making it really hard for farmers. Unfortunately, the guy who was doing that talk was sick, so I didn't get to go to that guy. But I tried to. Okay, free stuff online. Khan Academy. It's free. Udacity, I think they're charging now. Coursera, all kinds of free college classes online. MOOCs, massive open source online classes. There's all kinds of free stuff. It's right there in your computer. Free programming, computer programming forums, all kinds of good stuff. Remember that magic word forum? When I was in high school, a science teacher showed me the optical illusion room in a movie, and I got interested in it. And in the HBO movie, they showed the actual film I saw in high school. So I got all infatuated with optical illusion rooms. And he made me figure out how to make it myself. And there's the movie crew. There was lots of mild autism there. And how did they get those jobs? They had a friend that needed some scenery painted. You know, you got to work those informal back doors. You got so many things with social media and stuff like that now. People just aren't using it. There's the plant where I started. Front door didn't work. But there's the shirt I was wearing when I met the wife of their insurance agent. And I hand embroidered that shirt. This one I didn't. A computer in China did this. And when I went to Thailand, they made me a silk tie shirt. And I wanted the same kind of design. Yeah, they found the pirate on a line somewhere and put the same design on it. It's done by a computer. I was wearing my portfolio and didn't realize it. People respect ability. Jobs for visual thinkers like me, industrial design. When you design a product like an iPad, Steve Jobs was an artist to figure out the simple way to do the interface. Engineers had to make it work. That's where you need to have the different kinds of minds. Then you have people to put together all the hardware, like all the sound systems and stuff here tonight. Graphic arts, drafting, auto mechanics, AV technicians, photographers. There's lots of different kinds of jobs. When I went to the Emmys and the Golden Globes, I was really interested in how they took a really boring Hilton and they made it really cool with all of this stuff. They weren't allowed to make one hole in the wall or in the floor. Well, somebody had to make all those decorations that don't make holes in the floor. How about the pattern thinkers? These are the mathematicians, the computer programmers. In the Autistic Brain book, got a lot of stuff there. on jobs and preparing for jobs. Chemistry, mathematics, computer programmers. How about our word thinkers? One of the jobs they'll be really good at is specialized retail. Because let's say they're selling shoes, or they're selling sporting goods, or they're selling jewelry. They're going to know everything about it. Customers are going to appreciate that. But the boss is going to have to coach them on how to interact with customers, because you've got to learn like interacting in a play. Journalism. I've been interviewed by journalists that I know are on the spectrum. How about stage actor? And how about people with poor verbal skills? We got to find stuff that they're good at. Got to just get creative in the neighborhood. Now my mother, one thing she's emphasized in her talks, takes a village to raise a child. We got to just figure out stuff in the neighborhood. We can do for jobs, we can do for activities. There's going to be a lot of retirees. Well, that retired auto mechanic's going to get pretty bored. You might think it's fun to teach kids about mechanics in his garage. You know, simple things like that. But the problem we've got with autism is then you've got the kids that remain extremely severe. And that's very stressful for the family, because the family is not able to do normal activities with that kid. This is the problem with autism. It's so variable, and it's all got the same name. It doesn't really make much sense. You know, mother likes to get moms together, talk about stuff. When you evaluate treatments, you got to look at risk versus benefit. Giving powerful drugs out to little kids is not a very good risk versus benefit. Then you have cost versus benefit. Now, some advantages here. You have a lot more services paid for than we do. But we've got a large amount of really poor people in the U.S. down south that have no services at all. So in some way, you're going to have to go to your church and get some grandmothers to volunteer to work with a kid. And there's a lot of people out there selling a lot of stuff that's really expensive. And if something's expensive, dangerous, or super time-consuming, I got to have a lot more evidence-based. Colored paper, yeah, I'm going to just go out and try it. Okay, you're going to try a medication or a supplement, try one thing at a time. Don't try a drug at the same time you change schools. How do you know what worked? A medication should have an obvious beneficial effect, like, wow. Doesn't have some wow, then maybe you shouldn't be taking it. If you're on a cocktail of junk, you're going to have to wean it off slowly. Be careful switching brands of generics. This applies to every drug you take for any reason. They are not exactly the same. And don't expect a drug to give you 100% control, because it won't. You get 90%, be happy. These are some good books on medications that you can pick up online. Parent's Guide to the Medical World of Autism was written by an old pediatrician who's really wise. The Violently Aggressive Child book mainly discusses the use of blood pressure pills to control kind of hot and sweaty kind of explosive rage. And that's a lot safer than some of the other drugs. Okay, special diets work for some people. Don't work for everybody. There are some people that benefit from like gluten-free, casein-free. B6 and magnesium helps some people. Exercise, it helps everybody. I do 100 sit-ups every night. Some kids find a weighted blanket helpful. The omega-3 supplements are getting good science that shows that they are good for the brain. We have an omega-3 deficient diet. Tried to eat some salmon every week. I was really good. I had yummy salmon with pesto sauce, and then I had chocolate cheesecake for dessert. And I managed to avoid that tonight. I saw some cheesecake in this restaurant at lunch. We avoided it. And tons of sugar in the diet. Let's cut it out. Okay, antidepressants. Where antidepressants really work is for anxiety. For anxiety in low doses. And Prozac and Zoloft, or fluoxetine and sertraline, those work really well. Probably good first picks. I have a lot of information on medications in Thinking in Pictures. Also in my Way I See It book. We've got copies over there. I'll be signing them. We've got to sell them all. Because to get the books, we had to ship them to a UPS place in the U.S., take them across the border with $500 worth of customs fees. And we can't send them back. So I want to definitely get our books sold tonight. We were really lucky to get them. Okay, these are the heavy guns. And way too much of this stuff's given out like candy. But sometimes a very low dose of a drug like risperidol can help on aggression. But you use a really low dose because these drugs can make you fat, give you diabetes, and have really bad side effects. So you always want to use the lowest dose that works. The low dose principle. Oftentimes this is lower than the label dose. Yeah, I know. I know on animal drugs at least they say, well, you got to give it at the label dose. Doctors are free to change that for people. But sometimes the label dose is too high and it's a mess when you do the label dose. You got to lower it. Cut it in half or something. Okay, here are the blood pressure meds. And these often work really well on the hot and sweaty, kind of hot and sweaty. You get all hot and sweaty when they throw a fit. Okay, epilepsy drugs. I just talked to a family today where their kid got up to about age 4 and then had a big regression, having a lot of staring spells. What may be happening is little teeny epilepsies are scrambling the brain. That's where an epilepsy drug might work. I've also written about that in Thinking in Pictures, even though it's old now. That stuff is still accurate. Do you know in the last 20 years that not anything really that new has come along? There's been really no new breakthroughs. You just got to learn how to use the old stuff. Okay, ADHD drugs like stimulants. There's genetic crossover between mild autism and ADHD. They get misdiagnosed all the time. Stimulants, love them or hate them, 1 or 2 pills. Usually they make nonverbal autism worse. Look up all your drug interactions. People take way too much stuff. Man, there's older people that are taking like 15 different things, and they're all interacting and doing really bad things. Maybe you don't need to be taking so many medications. Got to look up all the interactions between all the stuff that you're taking. Now, here's some of my family genetics. On my mother's side, my grandfather was an MIT-trained engineer, the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. Anxiety and depression on both sides, visual thinking on mother's side. My sister and brother and all of them got a lot of visual thinking skills, food allergies on the father's side, intellectual giftedness and creativity. A little bit of that goes along with autism. You see, a little bit of the autistic trait gives an advantage. Too much is definitely not an advantage. Okay, this is a book about famous scientists and musicians that probably were on the autism spectrum. Also, got my Different Not Less book over there, which is 14 old Asperger's, all employed, low-level to high-level jobs, that got diagnosed later in life because their relationships were a mess. And that is where the diagnosis is helpful, on understanding the relationships. Now, on the job side, I'm seeing too many kids held back. I've worked with too many people in construction that I know are on the spectrum, like weird welding guys, metal fabrication guys. And they were really, really good tradespeople, and they were really smart. They're building a big Cargill plant. That wasn't easy stuff. It was complicated stuff. And you wouldn't even be able to make a big Cargill plant without a little bit of on the spectrum. Okay, what I want to do right now is open it up for questions. Okay, so let's just look at get some questions. Okay, over there, and I'll repeat the question. I'll be able to hear you. Risperidol. Okay, when you tried a drug, the first thing you got to go, did it do anything? Yeah, that's one of the problems. You see, the atypical antipsychotics are really bad on side effects, things like diabetes and getting horribly fat. Okay, if his mouth is opening and closing, he's got what's called tardive dyskinesia. That is an abnormal movement disorder. Yeah, you get that, you got to get off of it. Because if you don't, that side effect can be permanent. Well, the first thing, okay, now, one thing I want to try to get you to do is to think really, logically about medications. Okay, let's just start out how we troubleshoot. And I'm going to use the engineering way to do it because I take more of the engineering thing. Okay, how old is this kid? He's 7. Okay, what? Nonverbal or verbal? Nonverbal. Okay. All right. Now, the next step is what was he doing that made you think this drug might work? I'm just trying to get you to think about it logically. Very, very aggressive. Okay, now we got to look at what brings on the aggression. Was it sound sensitivity? Because actually in my country, that drug risperidol is approved for irritability associated with autism. That's the one thing it's actually approved for by the FDA in the US. And sometimes a little bit of risperidol works. Now, how long was he on it before he got the tardive dyskinesia? 7 days and he got that? Yeah, because it's more common to get the tardive dyskinesia like after a year on it. Well, then you got to get off of it. Oh yeah, you got to. If you get that kind of side effect, you got to get off of it. And it was a super low dose. Yeah, that's fairly low. Well, and you can't obviously use that. Let's look at some other things for the aggression. Exercise. What's happening on the exercise front? Okay, because exercise can help. The other thing that can help is omega-3 supplements. And they take a while to work. They've got to get incorporated into the brain. Also, some are helped by B6 and magnesium supplements. That sometimes helps. And then there's some are helped by special diets. Now, the other thing you've got to rule out is medically uncomfortable or painful conditions. Constipation, yeast infections, urinary tract infections, earaches, toothaches. He's 7. Are any teeth coming in? Well, you're going to have to get that fixed. See, I think before you go and haul out the heavy psychiatric meds, let's clean up the medical problems. And one of the problems we got is doctors have a tendency to get in their silo and go, oh, well, he has autism, that's why his behavior's so horrible. But if he's constipated, that might make his behavior just horrible. Yeah, you need to go see that because acid reflux. I went to a seminar that was presented in Canada. There was a Dr. Bluey, and he showed a video of kids stretching like this, nonverbal kids. And when they do this, it's because this hurts right here. You see that behavior, you've got acid reflux. Get it treated before you get erosion of the esophagus, because that's going to make the behavior horrible if he's got that. But you see, you've got to, let's just start looking at a sensible way to troubleshoot stuff. Are we getting enough exercise? And if the kid has been good, and now all of a sudden he's horrible, there's a good chance it's a painful medical problem. Now, puberty can also trigger bad behavior. He's not going to be going to puberty at 7. That's why I've got to know what his age is. Also, another thing on the epilepsy drugs, if you have rages that seem to come out of the blue, nothing triggers it. It's out of the blue. Totally out of the blue. Like maybe he's just sitting out there listening to the music player, bam! Try an epilepsy drug. Because it may be a seizure. And the problem is, diagnosing these little tiny baby seizures is hard. Yeah, you're going to have to do a sleeping EEG with no sedatives. Have fun. So you might as well try an epilepsy drug. Now, if the epilepsy drug works, you've got to do blood tests for liver enzymes. And you have to do them. Well, you've got to make sure, but risperidol is not as bad on messing up the liver as epilepsy drugs. Epilepsy drugs, you've got to do it. But sometimes, when you have the rage that comes out of the blue, it's like a psychomotor seizure. Then the stuff that works is an epilepsy drug. And Dr. Joe Hudgens, he's now retired, doctor, would take all the difficult cases in Canada. And on some of these difficult cases, he did a little bit of risperidol, but okay, you can't take that. But the other drug he'd use was Depakote, old-fashioned epilepsy drug. You know, you try it, you'll know right away if it's going to work. But you've got to clear up the other problems, like constipation. You've got to get that stuff fixed. Okay, right there.
My grandson's going to be 3 soon, and he was diagnosed with autism, and he had speech and totally lost.
He had speech and totally lost it. What are you doing for therapy right now?
He goes to rehab once a month, and
How much, he's 3 years old, how much in a week does he get a one-to-one intense interaction with a teacher or a therapist?
Doesn't, because he does not like the building to begin with. So they teach my daughter and she teaches him.
Or she's teaching him, but then maybe get some volunteers to come in.
Yeah.
Are you getting any progress?
Well, he lost his speech. Now he'll talk and say things like repetitive things that he sees on TV or songs.
But he's starting to get some speech back.
Yes, but he won't talk to a person. Like he'll just repeat what he's heard, or he'll.
Well, and it's common lots of time for autistic kids to repeat what's heard. But 3 years old is a time that you need to be working with them really intensely with a lot of one-on-ones. If you try to do it all yourself, you're going to go crazy. Yeah. Get some volunteers to come in and help work with them. Because you've got to try, because if you just let them sit and rock all day, then they don't develop. On the other hand, a little bit of stimming can help calm them down. I was allowed to have 1 hour after lunch to revert back to autism. Spinning things, spitting, doing all kinds of awful things. And then the rest of the time I had to be tuned into the world. And then when I got older, that time I had after lunch became the time to make things rather than just do autistic behavior.
He gets really, he has this, I probably should change the position, but there's a corner in my house where there's a shelf and it has all different cereals and stuff, and he goes there and points at it and screams every 5 seconds. You could give him something out of it, but he'll just keep screaming.
So he keeps screaming.
Because he can't communicate.
Because he can't communicate. It's very, very frustrating. I can remember the frustration of not being able to communicate. Like, see, then there's some things you better give him a way to communicate, like maybe use picture exchange system. Yeah. You know, try using that so he's got a way to communicate. Okay. You know, he's got to communicate. So you've got to figure out, is he behaving badly because he's in pain, or is he behaving badly because he's frustrated because he can't communicate? That's where you've got to be kind of a good detective. That's why I don't want to think about the top-down autism. Okay, what exactly is his problem? Because a lot of these early intervention things for very young kids are the same, regardless of how much chromosome deletion he has or some other thing. You still work with a lot of these things the same way. And on speech, obviously, of course, you have to make sure that there isn't something wrong with his mouth or with his throat. I had one family I talked to, and after talking to him 15 minutes, I found out the kid's tongue was like twice as long as normal. Well, maybe that might have something to do with speech. See, you've got to, you've got to rule out some kind of something totally abnormal like that. Okay, right here. Yeah, Loving Push is, and they weren't able to get any of those. That's more for older kids dealing with the video games. Now, if you're a kindergarten teacher, we do have copies of The Way I See It. It's a whole lot of little short chapters, and that's a really good book for teachers and parents working with younger kids. Okay, right over there, right here. Okay, marijuana. Well, in my state, it's legal. So there is a marijuana oil that doesn't have the stuff that makes you get high, that seems to be an effective drug for certain types of seizures. So maybe some of these kids were an epilepsy drug, maybe this oil might work. It's legal in Colorado. We can use this stuff. Pot does have some calming effects. And it is legal in my state. I don't touch it, because I'm scared to death it might get on an airplane and I'd be in so much trouble it wouldn't be funny. So I look at the pot, the gas station that's been turned into the pot station. I look at these things. Now, if I have the choice between somebody getting knocked up on alcohol or on pot, alcoholics can get mean, potheads don't. And people ask me, what is it? What's going on in Colorado? To me, it's been a non-issue. The car accidents have not gone up. Well, the thing with marijuana is there's some evidence that in young brains it's probably not a good idea. There's been some problems with IQ points going down. See, there's a lot of things where it's okay when the brain's mature. Now, this oil that's made from marijuana, that doesn't have the stuff that you get high on in it. But if a kid has got nonstop seizures, see, a lot of the epilepsy drugs are not very good for your IQ either. You know, there's some of them that aren't exactly good on the intelligence side of things. Oh, Topomax, yeah, some people say it makes you stupid. Okay, back there.
Hi, my son is 11.
He's 11. Okay, I've got to repeat some of these things so people can hear it.
He's 11. He's high functioning, very, very high.
Fully verbal.
Fully verbal, gifted. He's going to.
Okay, gifted. Okay.
We're having some extreme, like, egocentric issues with him.
What kind of issues?
Like he's very egocentric.
What do you mean by egocentric? What do you mean by that?
He believes he's smarter than his teachers, smarter than his parents.
Well, some of these things get into the rude category if he thinks he's smarter than everybody else.
And we're not really sure how to handle.
Now, what's he doing? Is he telling his teacher she's stupid?
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, all right, that's not okay.
And
That's not okay. He needs to be told that's not okay. But then on the other hand, maybe he needs much more challenging work. He may need much more challenging work. I'm not suggesting putting him in high school, but you get high school books and bring him back to that classroom. Is he tend to be a math kid or more a visual thinker? What's he?
No, he's actually all. And they are advancing him.
Well, they need to advance him because there's a lot of kids that turn into behavior problems because they're bored, absolutely stiff. And he needs to be given much more difficult work.
It turns into sort of somewhat meltdown and anger issues.
Well, they get into anger issues because they're bored.
Right.
And you are going to have to give them things to stimulate them. I was talking to one parent that had a kid that needed harder math work, and they were using Common Core workbook. He hated that. So that's when I started looking for geometry lessons, and I got the brainstorm of looking them up on Google Images rather than on Google, and I was finding fabulous websites. You know, just if he likes math things, like geometry, just look it up on Google Images and let him pick the websites. Now, since it is open internet, that needs to be supervised.
Right.
But there's absolutely fabulous stuff. I couldn't believe the wonderful stuff I could find on math and geometry when I used the images function to find it.
So no consequences for behavior?
Well, there needs to be some consequences for being rude to the teacher.
Should it just be like what you're talking about making him understand that the behavior's not appropriate?
Well, he needs to be explained to him the behavior's not acceptable and there'd be some consequences. If I said something really rude to the teacher, there'd be no TV that night.
Well, we've had teachers say that they don't believe that we should be taking things away from him, and we believe you should lose.
Well, sometimes, it depends upon the situation. Throwing a hissy fit in class, for me, the rule was no television for one night. If I threw a tantrum, didn't matter home or school, that was the rule. But then on the other hand, I don't want this kid bored stiff in class,
Right.
and we need to be getting harder work for him to do.
He is.
And maybe he needs to be introduced to computer programming. And those lessons are free online on Khan Academy.
I wrote that down.
You can look that up.
Great. Thank you.
Okay? Right there. 3 years old, okay. Is he talking yet?
No.
Not talking. Okay, what do you do in therapy?
In September, we started him in daycare. He had about 10 words. Now he has about 50.
So he's getting some words gradually. That's good.
Here in Sault Ste. Marie, the wait list for everything is...
You know what you're going to have to do? There's a wait list for everything. You got to start working with this kid. Get some volunteers, working with him now.
I'm trying to understand what kind of resources or what kind of activities we should be using at home.
Turn-taking games. Teaching them manners. I got lots of stuff in my way. I see it booked. I got a few copies over there. You got to work with this kid, and work on getting him to request things.
Yeah, he's starting to request.
Teach him words. You know what? It's not rocket science. But what the research is very clear on is you got to start working with this kid now. And the thing that I found is some teachers have the knack. Okay, the pig farms I found. Out of 8 employees, only 1 person had the patience to be the pig whisperer. Well, it's kind of that same way with teachers. You got to find the people that have the knack, because you got to start working with them. Lots of turn-taking games, just teaching them words, singing the ABCs, Teaching them reading words. Well, just keep teaching them more stuff. Read to them out of books. It's not rocket science. I'll tell you that right now. You're taking a what kind of course? Okay, well, I don't know what the Hannon course is, but if that's helpful, do it. But you can't wait. You can't let this kid vegetate all day on electronics. Absolutely not. Don't get so hung up on it. Just work with the kid. Teach them words. Play turn-taking games with them. Sing songs with them. Always give him an opportunity to use his words. Requesting food. Start out learning food, clothing items, things he might want. And you just keep building up that language. There's a lot of people want to make you think it's rocket science. It's not. Get some volunteers to come in and don't tell them they're doing therapy. Tell them they're playing with them. That's what you do. There's a lot of grandmothers that work with them. Just do stuff with them. Little games with them. Little nursery games with them. Stuff like that. You see, the thing is, if you try to do all the time with them, you're going to go crazy. You're going to need some help. There's a lot of people in this room right here that can probably help you. Why don't you hang around the book table? They'll probably come up to you. Okay? Because you got to get this book sold. Okay, right there.
My daughter was a late diagnosis. She was just diagnosed.
Or she was diagnosed at what age?
11.
11. Fully verbal?
Yes.
Okay, doing well in school?
Not really. Like she's bored.
She's bored.
She does well enough to get by, and she's passing with like C's and D's. But my question is, she's not very good at socializing.
She's not socializing. The way a lot of these kids are going to get socialization is through shared interests, like art, music, or something, something like that. What cooking class?
I've tried getting her involved in she likes basketball. I've tried.
All right, well, get her involved in basketball then.
But when she gets there, she won't participate. And you ask her what she wants to do or what she likes, and she'll say, "I don't know."
Well, what happened? Why won't she participate in the basketball?
I don't know. We put her in it. She was in it for a year, and every time they tried to talk to her or try to explain to her how to play the game or whatever, she would just shut down.
Is she getting sensory overload? It's pretty noisy in a gym. It might be too noisy for her. Maybe find some quieter activity.
But I don't know what she likes. You ask her what she
Well,
likes.
you see, when I was her age, it was obvious I liked art. And I liked making stuff. What would she do if she was by herself? Watch TV or something?
She plays on her iPad, or she'll...
What's she doing on the iPad?
She's actually going on Prodigy, which is an educational site. And it's a math program.
It's a math program. Why don't we introduce programming?
Okay.
See if she can do programming. All right, I'll tell you the hot languages. Make you hot. And the companies are it's C++, Charlie++, Ruby, Python, and JavaScript. Java like coffee, Ruby like the jewel, Python like the snake, and Charlie++, C++. Okay. See if the programming bug bites. Okay. And then maybe get her in a computer club. Would be a good thing to do because I want to get her doing things with other people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've tried, and she just doesn't.
The basketball, there may be a sensory problem with that. Gyms are really noisy.
Okay.
Okay, let's take 2 more questions, and then we'll go over the book table. Okay, back there. Okay. Okay.
What is something that your teachers did growing up that helped you the most?
Or helped me the most?
Yes.
Okay, let's just go through. First of all, 2.5, I was in really good intervention. I went to a speech therapy nursery school that had about 3 hours a week of one-on-one, sort of behavioral speech therapy, and structured nursery school activities 3 mornings a week. I had a nanny, 3 sit-down structured meals every day. And then in the afternoon, we do a board game or turn-taking activity with my sister. Maybe an outdoor activity like making a snowman where we had to take turns. That really helped me. Then when I was elementary school, some very good elementary school teachers. When I got into high school, it was my science teacher. Of course, my mother had a really good sense of just how much to push me. And when I got out in the cattle industry, there were some good people in the cattle industry that saw my abilities, and they helped me. But you always have got to kind of, there's no single magic turning point. When a kid is 3 and nonverbal, I can give you a stock canned answer on what to do. But once they get older, I'm going to have to customize it a whole lot. Little kids, if you got a 3-year-old that's not talking, the worst thing you can do is nothing. You got to get 20 or 30 hours a week of structured activities. And that includes sit-down Miss Manners meals. That's going to be about 10 of those hours. Because that was an important thing. Learning, please and thank you, turn-taking games. Okay, right there. Oh, the immune system and autism, the immune system's messed up. There's no question about that. Okay, one more question. Okay, right there. He's stimming. Okay, now for kids stimming, I was allowed to have an hour after lunch where I did some stimming. Now, if he's shaking his head, you've got to make sure there's nothing wrong with his ears. You need to check that out. Okay, there's no fluid in the ear or anything like that, so that'll make them shake their head. But he does the stimming when he's excited. That is common. And kids will sometimes do stimming to calm down. And sometimes a little bit of stimming, sometimes okay to let them do it. I was taught that I couldn't do stimming at the dinner table in a school, but there were some places when I was by myself I could do a little bit of stimming. But you can't let them do it all day, because if they do it all day, they won't develop. How often is he doing it? Well, if you would add up the time that he did it, and it's 15 minutes out of the whole day, I'm not going to worry about it. If he's doing it for 6 hours a day, I'm going to be real worried about it. If he's doing it, and he gets excited, the other thing you've got to look at, are you on an improvement trajectory? If you're on an improvement, gradually improving, then you're doing things right. And as long as he's gradually improving, and it's a small amount of total time, is he fully verbal? No. He's not fully verbal. But he's starting to get words. Yeah, we're very hopeful that he will. And he's how old now? He's 4. He's still very, very young, and I hope he's getting lots of, behavioral kind of speech therapy stuff too. And there's a lot of situations where maybe only get 1 hour a week of therapy. Well, then use that professional teacher as a coach to teach other people how to do it. Because I definitely believe in professional guidance. And 1 hour a week is plenty for professional guidance. So you wouldn't recommend stopping him then? Well, if he's yelling in the middle of the store, I want to teach him that he needs to wait, and there's some places where we just don't do it. Like in the middle of Walmart. Then you've got kids where they're getting sensory overloaded. When they get sensory overloaded, they will start doing some stimming. Okay, well, I think we're going to end there, and I want to thank everybody for coming.
You want to draw some numbers for us?
Okay.
We have, there's 2 prizes, so.
Okay, I drew a number here. I drew 572994. That is 572994. Okay, we'll draw another one. And it is 572996. Well, again, it's on 572996. Okay.
So the pastry shop donated a little package here, and the foundation has a Temple's movie here. So whoever is the winner, she can sign that for you by the table. Which one did you have?